Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to give you 5 red flags if you are a home buyer shopping for homes. Real quick before we get started, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hasan. I'm a real estate agent in Vancouver, and I make educational real estate content to help you in your real estate journey. I also make content to help you make your move in and around Vancouver. So if that sounds interesting to you, subscribe to this channel. Don't miss a future video. So as promised, I'm going to give you 5 red flags, but if you stick around until the end, I'm going to give you a 6th red flag that is never talked about, but something you really need to be aware of if you're shopping for home. And if you see this red flag, you got to run. All right, so the first red flag that you want to be aware of as a home buyer is any homes that are sold in as-is condition. What that means is the home seller is not willing to make any representations about the property. If anything is discovered during the period of an inspection, etc., the seller is not going to take any onus on getting any repairs done. Now, we see as-is situations in a couple different occurrences. Court-ordered sales or foreclosure type sales are typically as-is. The bank is just trying to get their money back and they can't really make representations on the property because they don't live in that property, etc. But we also see it sometimes, I've noticed, with elderly sellers that they don't want to deal with any of the headache of any sort of repairs, etc. that might come up. The reason that it's a red flag is anytime a seller is not willing to make any representations about a property, you as a buyer now have to think, is this seller trying to not disclose something that they know and hence they're selling it as is? Or is it just a fact, again, of them not wanting to deal with it? So that's something that you need to navigate. So not all as-is properties are red flags per se. Sometimes the situation makes sense, but if you do see an as-is property, you need to understand, why that's occurring, why it's being sold as is, and that can guide your decision on whether to move forward on that property. Now, the second red flag is when the seller does not fill out a property disclosure statement. It's somewhat tied to the sold as is. So what it means is the property disclosure statement, it's a series of questions that the seller has to fill out, asking them if they're aware of any sort of issues or restrictions with the property. For example, one of the questions on that disclosure says, are you aware of any unauthorized alterations made to the property, i.e. work that was done without permit? Are you aware of any growth of illegal substances in the past prior to you or while you were in the unit? So it asks a series of questions that a seller has to say, yes, I'm aware, or no, I'm not aware. Now, there are times where this property disclosure, or what we call in the industry the PDS, when this isn't filled out, number one is when it's an investment property. If it's tenanted, very often you'll get a property disclosure statement that is crossed out because it's reasonable that the seller can't really make declarations or representations about the property if they don't live in it. They're probably not aware of this stuff, so in that instance, it tends to be crossed out. But if a seller actually is residing in the property and they have not filled out a property disclosure statement or shown you one or told you they're going to get you one upon accepted offer, run from that property because they are very likely holding something back, not wanting to make a representation about the property. Now, this property disclosure statement, you can incorporate it into the contract, and often we do. But it's very hard, just so you know, it's very hard to go after a seller when the representations are worded as, are you aware of? Because it's hard to prove whether someone was aware or not. So keep that in mind with the property disclosure. That's a bit of a side note, is even if it's filled out, even if it's incorporated into the contract, it can be tough to go after a seller later on for it. But if it's not filled out and the seller lives in there, that's a red flag. The other people that want to see this property disclosure statement is the lender. They want to see what the seller knows or doesn't know about the property as well. So if a property disclosure is not filled out, run from it. All right, so the third red flag that I want to share with you, and this is if you are in a strata, you're buying a condo unit. It's not high strata fees. It's not a low contingency reserve fund, although that could have made the list. But in this case, it's when there are a series of special levies that are proposed by the strata that are always turned down. Now, as a buyer, you might think, okay, this is a good thing because I don't have to worry about unexpected expenses coming up because everyone keeps voting down the work that needs to be done. So I don't get this surprise bill. I'm a happy camper. That's the wrong answer, because when you have a history of special levies being voted down, what that tells you is that the owners of that building are not proactive in the maintenance of that building. And essentially, by turning down special levies like that, it devalues your unit if you ever put it for sale. It can cause obviously issues in the future if you're not getting capital expenditures done or routine maintenance done on the property. If you have a set of owners that are not proactive about taking care of the property, that's so detrimental to the value of your property. And also, when someone's purchasing the property, so the next buyer, they're going to be reviewing the minutes as well. They're going to see that work never gets done in the building. It's going to be looked at as a poor asset. So the next red flag that you want to look for is when you're actually walking through the home, you want to see if there are any signs of mold. A good place to check for this is when you're walking through, if you look at the corners where essentially walls meet ceilings. In the bathroom, it tends to be obviously a more humid room, but also in other rooms as well, because that's a red flag that there's possibly a couple of issues. Number one, there's an airflow issue where it's not able to get moisture out of the unit. So that's number one. And number two, if there's significant mold or significant signs of it, it can be an indication potentially of a property that was a former grow op. So you have to be really careful when it comes to moisture and airflow, because that can deteriorate your unit. It's often not super visible. So again, it tends to accumulate kind of in the corners if you're gonna see it. This is different than like a water stain. If you see a water stain on the ceiling, I mean, that's also a red flag. That's something that you would naturally investigate. But again, if you get any indication that there's mold or airflow issues into the property, what that means is you just need to investigate it further. It doesn't necessarily mean run right away, but it's something that needs to be investigated further. If I see it in multiple areas, to me, that's a red flag. All right, so the fifth red flag that I want to give you today is if the seller or the listing agent resists an inspection in any way. So for example, if I'm representing you as a buyer, we will often write that we are purchasing this property subject to a home inspection getting done. Now, most listing agents and sellers are totally fine with you coming in and doing an inspection. It makes sense. You're making it a significantly large purchase. Of course, you're going to want to get it inspected. But I've had instances in the past, and other realtors have as well, where either the seller or the listing agent is pushing back and saying, you know, do you really need to get the inspection done? Now, during a hot market when there's multiple offers going on, and this isn't advice that I'm giving you, but some buyers will say, I'm not going to get an inspection done. And as a seller, you like to see that, because that's one less thing that you have to worry about, potentially blowing the deal apart. So it does happen in a hot market, but you very rarely will get any sort of pushback for putting it in the contract that you want to get the inspection done. I've had it happen where the other side is like, do you really need to do it? It's a condo, you can read the documents, etc. Red flag. Why don't you want me to inspect the unit? Again, we might lose the deal because of that clause, but that's not what's important. What's important is that you're buying something that you can feel confident about buying. And if it's not this one, it's going to be another one. So the seller and the listing agent should never push back on you for wanting to get an inspection done. If they do, they're hiding something, run away. All right, so I told you off the top that I was going to give you one bonus red flag, and this is a bit of a gray area. You don't see it listed many places, but this happened to me and clients. When a home has been sitting on the market too long and you're able to negotiate a deal on that property relatively quickly, it's relatively easy. What I mean by that is when a home is sitting too long on the market, there could be a number of reasons. Often it comes down to price. Sometimes it'll come down to finance. They had some offers, go through, but then they couldn't get the financing done. But when a home is sitting on the market too long, immediately your agent has to determine, okay, why has this been sitting here? Now, I had clients last year where we had a home, it was sitting on the market for quite some time. It was a very frenzied market. We're actually in the peak, January, February of last year. Frenzied market, we were able to get an accepted offer on this one at a reasonable price for the area. And it happened relatively quickly, yet this home had been sitting on the market for some time. So anytime that that happens and the negotiation is a little too easy for me, my guard goes up. Not that it's a red flag per se, but just that I need to do more investigating. And through our due diligence process, investigating into the property, we ended up learning ultimately that the home had been significantly rebuilt. And the reason that it had been rebuilt is because it had been a former grow up. And this was not disclosed to us. We found this out by requesting documents through the city. Now, we were very lucky, my buyers, that we didn't write a no subject offer. The market was hot enough to do that, but we were very clear that we wanted to do due diligence on this property. Again, because why is it sitting there for that amount of time? Why were we able to negotiate a deal very quickly? And ultimately, the city document showed us that the reason why it had been rebuilt was because it was a former grow up. So the silver lining about all of these red flags that I just mentioned to you, and there's a whole bunch more, I could have made this video go on for a long time, is you don't have to deal with them. That's why you work with realtors like myself, because we live and breathe these red flags. We know what to notice, what to look for. So you don't have to worry about them, but it's something for you obviously to think about and just get familiar with. But again, this isn't your problem. This is a realtor's problem to bring to you and to highlight to you. Now, if you are in the Vancouver area and you're looking at making a real estate move and you want me to help you in these scenarios where there may be red flags, reach out to me anytime. You can hit me up in the Calendly link below, or you can send me an email, shoot me a text, give me a call, whatever is easier for you, and I can take care of these situations for you. If you enjoy this type of real estate content, you want to see more in the future, do me a favor, hit the like button, because what it does is it sends these red flags out to more home buyers so they can also learn from it and they can make sure they don't get caught up in situations like this as well. And if you like this content, subscribe to this channel. That way you're not going to miss a future video. Outside of all of that, guys, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful day.